If you don't pay attention to recruiting, you must be pretty darn confused right now about the hype around Tennessee, because that is what the hype is coming from. The hype is coming from recruiting. Does recruiting matter to you? It should, but maybe it doesn't. I, judging by the comment section, have been informed that a lot of people really don't care about recruiting all that much. So I'm scrolling the other day. As I told you, I read every one of these comments. How should I frame this? I know how I want to frame it. So the other day, we've talked about Tennessee like the last four shows. I can't help it, guys. They keep landing recruits. They keep landing verbal commitments from recruits. Okay, let me preface point one, because a lot of people hear what I don't say, strangely enough. So I got to make sure I point out what I am and what I am not saying. About to have to do that again. So Tennessee, they're landing a bunch of kids, and I'm not just talking about project 3-star with future 3-year down the road potential. I'm talking about big time 5-star talent out of Alabama, 5-star talent out of South Florida. They've gotten kids out of Georgia, JUCO kid, top running back in the country from South Carolina, and JUCO right now in Kansas. So, and it keeps going. They probably landed a couple of kids since we've been on air. So, as we led the show talking about, they could stick, maybe they don't. I like where Tennessee is right now in recruiting. That's all I'm saying. Here's what I'm not saying. What I'm not saying is, well, you can go and pencil them into Atlanta within the next couple of years. I don't know that. You don't. Listen, I don't know that about a loaded team. I can't say that about Florida, and Florida's roster's better than Florida right now. You know who you have to go through in the East, that name that shan't be mentioned, Georgia. So I'm looking at the comment sections. And the comment section, the Tennessee fans are jacked, as you should be. And then I got some folks, this is how you know you still got some work to do. I mean, I kid you not. I read one comment that said, I'm a Bama fan, but I do want to, I want to see Tennessee back. It's just boring to beat up on them like we've been doing. Well, that's when you know you're not back yet. That's when you know you still got hay to put in the barn. You want them to despise you. You remember, it's been about a decade since that rivalry's been relevant, but you remember what it was like in Tuscaloosa and surrounding areas when Bill Fulmer tried to decapitate your program. You remember that. A lot of you haven't forgotten. Apparently, in the comment section, some of you have. So I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking the other night when I was on the air, which led me to say on the air, Tennessee, a lot of people are shocked by the commitments. A lot of people making accusations about all these commitments. And I'm like, Tennessee has never lacked the ability to build an elite roster. They've never lacked the ability to have a roster every bit as skilled and talented, important to have both of them, skilled and talented, as anyone else in America. I got a surprising amount of pushback, to be honest with you. I got a lot of surprising amount of pushback on that. And so that leads me to ask, what is it you think they don't have? If you're in that camp that believes Tennessee's ceiling is below the elite level, in other words, they can press all the right buttons and there are just unforeseen factors, very present, but unforeseen or unseen in the world of college football that limits their ceiling. What is that? A crop duster can't fly as high as a commercial jet can. There is an artificial ceiling built in on that crop duster. So Tennessee, like, what's the ceiling here? And if it's lower than elite status, what is it that's keeping them there? Because here's what I think, to steal another transportation analogy. My first vehicle was a 94 GMC Sierra. And I drove it a long, long time. Loved it. Had no problem with it. Was very thankful for it. But it wasn't a Lamborghini. And so we didn't have a lot of those at Harris County High School, to be honest with you. Had a couple. You know what kind of kids those turned out to be. But the 94 GMC, at its peak efficiency, if I pulled up next to a Lamborghini and the thing was sitting on blocks because the tires were flat, how stupid would it be for me to laugh at the capability of that vehicle? I didn't say there was smoke coming from under the hood. I didn't say that the entire axle was bent and it was irreparable. I just said the tires are flat. As soon as someone comes and fixes the tires on this Lamborghini, it can embarrass me. It can donut me. It can be like Tokyo Drift, and it can just make me look foolish in that truck, no matter how well I have that truck running, because the Lamborghini's ceiling is a lot higher, with all due respect to me and other former 94 GMC Sierra owners, than the aforementioned 94 GMC Sierra. My point is, Tennessee's capability level is that of a Lamborghini. This is not Miami of Ohio. And this is not even Missouri. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to Missouri, but I intentionally say Missouri because I'm about to bring up a point in a second. But I want you to ask yourself if you believe there is a built-in ceiling for Tennessee below elite status. Let's dive into it a little bit. Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, LSU, pick the elite teams in college football, Ohio State. What keeps Tennessee from being that? I'm not asking you what has kept them from being that. That's the easy answer. That's the obvious answer. What would keep them, if all the right buttons were pressed, from being that? It's not a guessing game. Here's why I mentioned Missouri. Missouri, even if they started rolling, which they did under Gary Pinkel a time or two, there was a fair amount of questioning done about that program in regard to how good could they really get? Like, man, they played in the SEC championship game, I think a couple times, didn't they? And, if you're in the SEC championship conversation, you're in the national championship conversation, but people were fairly asking, man, Missouri is in, well, Columbia, Missouri. There's no real pipeline of talent there, the likes of which you get in Gainesville, Florida, or Athens, Georgia, Austin, Texas, etc. How long can this last? What is the ceiling on that program? That was fair. And the ceiling for Missouri football, sustained ceiling, is below elite status. At Tennessee, it's not like that. Here's how I know. They've done it already, and they've been a national contender in different eras with different coaches. If you want to go mid-late 80s into the 1990 timeframe, Johnny Majors did it there. If you want to go late 90s, Philip Fulmer won a national championship there, won back-to-back SEC championships, 97, 98, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but won a national championship. That's only a little over 20 years ago. Some of you aren't 20 years old, but yet in college football, relativity, 20 years, not all that long a time. But even if it is, if you're telling me they're not capable of it now, that must mean something's changed in the sport. As far as I can tell, Knoxville's in the same place. As far as I can tell, they still care a great deal about football there. So if you're telling me they're not capable anymore of something that they have achieved already, I've seen it. I can go back and watch the old VHS replays. Something must have changed. So what is it? Because to me, it's not a guessing game of what they're capable of if they've already proven it. What does it take? What are the requirements? This is something you'll hear us talk about from time to time on this show. You got to have a really big support base. That's just a fan base that's rabid, that cares. They have to be fully bought in. There's a reason they got to be big in number, and they got to be fully bought in, because you got to have money. And you get it in the TV deals as a result of being in a conference like the SEC and the revenue sharing program there. But you need projects, and you need checks written, and you need to hire the best coaching staff that money can buy. And the optimum word there is money. And you got to have a big fan base fully bought in, because they need to write those checks. Tennessee has all this. This is not something they lack. Trust me, they have it. You have to have facilities, which obviously is required to build. Tennessee's got great facilities. And if they're lacking today, they possess the war chest to catch up tomorrow. So that's nothing that they're lacking in. And this is the one that a lot of people go to, I think. You got to have access to red hot recruiting beds. If you're not parked there geographically, you got to have ties to get there. Here's where I think people are wrong, just to be honest with you. If you don't think Tennessee can recruit at the same level Georgia can, with the right staff in place, I'm not using the past couple of weeks as anecdotal evidence. Let's pretend the last 3 weeks have not even happened. Let's pretend Tennessee's ranked 21st in recruiting. We're talking about what they're capable of, not what they're doing at this very moment that could evaporate tomorrow. Tennessee's in Knoxville. I've always been a big believer, if you get the right staff in there and you expand that radius out 6 hours and look at all of the territory that is in that 6-hour circle around Knoxville, Tennessee, and you think about getting Atlanta there and virtually all of the Carolinas and getting up into parts of Virginia, close to the Tidewater, you recruit Ohio in the most fertile beds, at least. You've got the state of Tennessee. You got North Alabama. You got parts of Mississippi, I want to say. I don't have a map written in front of me. But take that and now combine it with having guys on your staff that have, whether you be T. Martin, connections out west, whether you be Jeremy Pruitt, connections all over the South, but especially in Alabama. That just paid dividends with Dylan Brooks out of Roanoke, Alabama, people. There is no Tennessee to Roanoke, Alabama pipeline. There just isn't. Never has been, never will be. And South Florida as well. When you look at the staff they have and you look at some emerging stars they have, that's the right combination. That's the kind of coaching staff that you have to have. But I just mentioned a whole bunch of prerequisites that it takes to be elite. That's what I think it takes to be elite. Those are the boxes you have to check. Maybe I left something out that you know about, or maybe you don't think one of these matters. I'd love to hear it. Because Tennessee, as far as I can tell, they're capable of checking all these boxes. Now, here's what I didn't say. This is the part where we have to give the great big asterisk next to the segment, and we have to give one final caveat. What I didn't say is this last couple of weeks proves anything in terms of what results will be. We also don't know if Jeremy Pruitt is going to end up being the right head coach. Now, if you're asking me what I think, absolutely. And I'd bet money on him. I think he is. And I think their staff is. And I think that they possess, as I said, the war chest to keep those guys in house. I think the balance is right up there. So they got a lot of ingredients in the kitchen. What's the meal going to look like? That's the big question that I can't wait to see answered every bit as much as you can't wait. But here's what I do know. What I do know is I've watched that team. Now, these are my eyeballs talking. I'm not a former coach. I'm not going to bring out a grease board and insult your intelligence or mine, making you think I am qualified to break this game down at that kind of level. But these eyeballs saw Tennessee play Alabama pretty tough last year, had no chance of beating them because of the talent gulf. These eyeballs have seen Jeremy Pruitt push Georgia, don't really have much of a chance of beating them yet because of the talent gulf. That's unless Georgia goes like, minus 4 turnovers like they did against South Carolina. If you have the coaching staff in place, if you have the football minds in place, and then you toss a whole bunch more talent in there, that talent gets turned into skill because they know how to turn it into skill. And they get put in the right place and they get trained the right way. And then all of a sudden, you got a different caliber athlete with which to harness your hopes and dreams to. Then things get really fun. So I think that's coming. I don't think that's an if. I think that's a whim. I think a lot of you who disagree, we just differ in terms of what we think Tennessee's capable of. That's really, I think, the crux of that entire debate, if you want to call it that. I'm happy to have it. I have been wrong a time or two. I just really feel pretty confident about this one.